Hi class, my name is Tamika and today I will be discussing evolutionary mechanisms and how they produce evolution. So first let's discuss what is evolution. The first thought that comes to mind for me is what is evolution is this picture of where you see the gorilla and over time it progresses into a human being sitting in front of a computer. So that pretty much tells you like or describes the difference of change. Like it started off, whatever time period this was, and over that particular time period, it has evolved. It began to walk upright. Next thing you know, it's sitting in front of a computer, able to function. So that will be my definition of evolution, or my example of evolution. And again, the definition is a change in L frequency over time. Now, you also have different mechanisms that contribute to evolution or that helps to produce the evolution. And the first mechanism we're going to discuss will be natural selection. And within natural selection, you have a population where, or at least for me, or my understanding is, you have two types of natural selection. You can have your survival portion of your natural selection, and you have your sexual portion of your natural selection. So within the survival, it's kind of like in the sense of the fittest, not necessarily the strongest, but what population or what gene survives throughout the weather conditions, throughout, maybe a drought in food or whatever circumstances that occur within that population in that time period. Whichever genes or elves that, or offsprings you could say too, that survive, that would be, they would consider the fittest, into the ones that are able to continue to produce and continue to survive in their population. And then when you go to think of sexual selection, it would be kind of more of finding that mate and being able to produce offspring, and then for them to produce offspring and just continue in that cycle. So that would be more of the sexual selection in my perspective. The next mechanism that we're going to discuss will be gene flow. Gene flow is exchange of genes between population. So my understanding is, say on one side you have population A, and then across the river you have population B. At some point in time, one of the population A's will cross over the river and mate with population B, and that would be kind of like the gene flow, and they would continue to produce, have offsprings, and therefore you would see a combination of population A and population B. So that would be my understanding of gene flow. The next mechanism we have is genetic drift. And genetic drift is also a change in L frequency, but it's kind of by chance. It's not something that you can kind of select. Like again, going back to natural selection, you can kind of know who may make it and not. When it comes to genetic drift, something happens or something occurs in a sense, and you only have this particular population left, but nobody knew that was going to happen. So that's why they say it's by chance that that particular L's did not make it or did not produce offspring. And within genetic drift, you have two ways of producing that genetic drift. And the first one would be bottleneck. And bottleneck for me, or at least how I remember it for myself, is like a major disaster or devastation, say a fire or a storm or something that will unfortunately kill off the population. So that would kind of be bottleneck for me, is where half of the population is no longer exists, and what's left is trying to rebuild. So then they would eventually, maybe go somewhere else and then try to reproduce and continue an offspring and try to, get their population back a larger size. Another form of genetic drift is the founder effect. And the founder effect would be kind of going back to the gene flow, where you have population A and population B. Say a portion in population B is like, we want to go over this other mountain we see, or this other river we see, and start our own population. This population B is getting too big. So then they go in, and now you have a population C, and they start their own population and try to, have, mate and create offsprings and try try to make their population bigger. So that would be a founder effect. You know, they went over and found a new place to reside to rebuild a population. And then the last would be mutation. And mutation is a change in genetic code. This also is random, similar to the genetic drift. Excuse me. And my understanding when it comes to mutation is basically, you know, when two people mate, unfortunately, the DNA replication has a slight glitch, you would call it, where one of the L's are mutated and they don't replicate the way that they should. So a good way of understanding the difference is, say, you know, your mother is population A or gene A, and your dad is gene B. So you would think, oh, okay, yeah, you know, and just layman's terms, the child would be AB, and again, just in layman's terms. But say that B would be like a lowercase b, you know, it wouldn't be the exact replication of its parents. So that would be like the mutation. Or say if, you know, another description would be you would have population where it's all red, and then the dad population was blue. That offspring will be all red with maybe a blue stripe. You know, that would be like a mutated genetic code that offspring has occurred. So again, those are the 4 mechanisms of evolution, and that was my interpretation of how they produce. Thank you guys, and hope you enjoyed it.